Hello there and welcome to episode 3 of my beginner tutorial series for EU5. In this one, we're going to talk about how to manage your empire. Previously, we have understood the basics of economy and how to control the game and its basics, and this time we're going to take a deep dive into all the things like stability, research, crown power, estate power, and all the other things in between that make your empire tick, basically. So, the first thing on my list that I want to introduce and talk about today is stability. Stability is a very, very important stat. It is generated by investing into stability on your tax tab, and it always tries to gravitate naturally towards zero. Positive effects of stability, if positive, is that your people are happier and folks are taking the higher quality jobs quicker. Consequences of negative stability are more rebels and people are pissed quicker, so you need to lower the taxes, earn less money, and have less people available at the jobs. It is something that you want to try to avoid under any circumstances, but the game loves to fling little events at you that force you to lower stability. Also, declaring war on people is taking heavy tax on your stability. These are the two main cost factors. Therefore, it does pay out to invest into stability to a certain degree. I personally like to be somewhere between 25 and 50, depending on how mighty my empire early game is. But I repeat, try to have this never in a negative value, because this is really bad. If you ever experience a dip into a negative threshold, always double check on your taxes, because it will shift to a lower total tax. So, right next to stability sits legitimacy. So this is how much the people accept the fact that we are being governed by a monarchy, by a tribal thing, a republic, whatever. Legitimacy is capped at 100 and should be always sitting there. It is the thing you should be aiming towards to, and it is being increased by investing into your court. The closer it is to 100, the better. The lower it goes away from there, the worse. Just period, like that. It is influencing mostly your crown power, but also it is influencing the rebel power. Crown power is exactly the next topic that I want to talk about. Legitimacy actually doesn't have that much more to talk about. Just try to keep it as close to 100 as possible and keep a positive income about it. It is less impactful than stability in my experience, but it is not much less important than stability. Now, let's talk crown power, and in the same point we need to talk about estate power. So, the crown power, you are basically the crown. As a player, you are incorporating the crown. So this is the power that is residing in the hands of you as a player, figuratively speaking. The rest of it is distributed between the estates that your country is having. Naturally, the nobility accumulates way more power than the other estates, because they have that nifty trick that they just spawn with a lot of power per population. Just check out that 700 nobles are generating 18 points roughly of political power, and now compare that to my 200,000 peasants. They're not nearly close to that. So, in short, power is distributed unevenly because some estates are inherently more powerful than others, and we want to have always as much of the power at the crown as possible, because positive effects happen when our crown power is above 25%. Most importantly, we gain a higher trade income. That is really, really good. Tax efficiency is also something you don't want to miss out. It's literally more money. The more crown power you got, the more money you got. And the other thing is that the rest of the power cake, so to speak, is also influencing how much tax everybody has to pay. So the nobility is hogging this way a portion of the taxes because they just have that power. This isn't so far bad, because when we look at the city here, in Den Haag, we have 50% of our taxes generated by the citizens, and the nobility is generating taxes that we just can't tax that well. And to make matters worse, the citizens are at least producing something, which goes back into our economy cycle, so they have an actual use. The nobility's only use is that they generate some money and they don't produce anything. And they hog power, like I said. The more you get of these, the more powerful they get. Another thing influencing the power of the estates is their privileges. So you can give them new privileges, and as you see there, every privilege acts as a multiplier or a negative multiplier on the power of these dudes. The interesting part here is that every estate that has a power over 25% also has positive effects. So it's not like you're only suffering from being low in power, but you should always try to have as much power as possible on your own hands and try to shift the rest as evenly between these as you can, but naturally speaking, it will always gravitate to a large clump that is being distributed between these three, and the peasants can look what they can get. What's really important for you to note is whenever you give a certain estate a privilege, they will be super happy for a while, and most importantly, you will gain many different bonuses out of that. One of my personal favorites is to give the peasants the ability to go for common militias. You will gain a lot more military power out of that, but they will also gain themselves a lot more power, which makes their political power go up again, because we gave them weapons, literally. So, all in all, this is something where you can spend a lot of time with, but I want to keep it beginner friendly with the TLDR. A high crown power is very good for you, and keeping the power bundled to the parts of your population that actually is productive and beneficial for you is the next best step. But here you have so many different strategical options that with a beginner's tutorial I can't just leave it here and need to do a completely separate video about estates, their privileges, and so on and so forth. Let's move on over to the next big thing instead, and that is values. Values are basically the cultural behaviors and habits of your country accumulated to different polar opposites. So it's always one extreme towards the other, and the more we gravitate towards one of these extremes, the more of the specific bonus we will get. If we ever reach the end of the bar, we will get the full bonus of decentralization or centralization. A good example here is that centralization really gives you a lot of positive benefits, whereas decentralization's benefits aren't as big as the others. There's a lot of these that where it is pretty clear which one you want to have generally, but most of these values are tinkered in a way that it really depends on your playstyle. Naval or land is one of the best examples here. If you are a country that is not even accessing the oceans, you will not be interested in that too much. And the rest, I'll leave it up to read it up for you how it works. What's really important to note, though, is that values can only be influenced very, very slowly. There is a permanent nudge towards a certain direction due to things that are attached to your culture, in short terms speaking. You can influence these, usually by events that happen. There's so many events that will pop up which give you the opportunity to shift your bias towards humanism or spiritualism, and so on and so forth. What I want trying to get down to here is this is nothing you can change quickly, and most of the time you will touch the values for the first time when you are going to reform your country, because reforms often require a certain value in a certain value at a certain rate. Centralization, for example, is necessary to found a monarchy, just to give you a quick thing here. You can also influence values by putting a cabinet member on there, but their impact on the societal values is limited insofar as they cannot go towards the permanent push into a certain direction. The permanent push factors can only be influenced over time, and cabinet members can give that little nudge to activate an event, for example. So, let's talk quickly about how to form new countries and realms. It is hidden here in the country tab, and here you can change your government type if you fulfill the necessary requirements. And every region has a certain area, has a certain few countries that you can form with them if you control enough of the areas. There's not much more to say about it at this point, because with the pointers that I've given you out of the tooltips, you can find out the rest. I just wanted to give you the button here. The next thing is laws. Laws are something that influences your country by a lot. When you're starting with a somewhat developed country, your laws will already be mostly defined. Here, Holland, for example, has all of these laws already defined. You can't take each and every one of these and change them for a certain amount of stability. When you discover new laws, though, you can write a new law and just invest money. Mind you that the first time you bring in a new law is the best time to get that law that you want, because later it becomes harder and harder to change them. But there's a nice gotcha inside there. There's a couple of laws that you cannot configure in the way that you want to configure them when you introduce them, because you are lacking certain requirements, or there's always a reason to look into these. In short, laws are easy to reconfigure if you can muster the stability cost, and when you introduce a new one, think well about the fact that it is very costly to change them. Now, next on my list, research. So, over here in the research tab, or here in this icon, we get to select what we research next. Couple of things. First up, our research speed is influenced by the literacy of our people. So increasing the average literacy of your folks is absolutely powerful. The power of the language used. If you are in the Catholic Church, you have no say in that, but language play, not really something you need to know as a beginner. Languages, basically, the more powerful the language you use, the more science you generate. It's enough to break it down into that simple points. What's most important here is, though, that happy clerics will, people that can read, and an amount of institutions embraced give you a good income. What are institutions? So when you look into the ages here, you see that every age has 3 institutions attached to them. Let's look into the tree here, and there's feudalism, legalism, and meritocracy in the Age of Traditions. In the Age of Renaissance, you have Renaissance, banking, and professional armies. These are influences on the science that need to be unlocked before you can access the respective skill tree, so to speak. There are a couple of basic skills that are available regardless of the institution. So, for example, here in the Age of Renaissance, everybody has access to this tree, but you need to embrace the institution professional armies first before you are allowed to research any of these technologies. The thing with these institutions is they randomly spawn somewhere on the world, and then, like culture spreads, they slowly will infect your country, and the more this has progressed, the cheaper it will get to adapt that institution into your economy. When you're starting out in the year 1337, you are already having a couple of institutions that make you select the technologies that you got, but in the upcoming ones, you will need to embrace the institution eventually to unlock new tech trees. This will happen also automatically if you don't do anything about it, but it will be much slower. Eventually, you will be asked if you want to spend that money to do so. What I want to point out here in the research for beginner-friendly things is I really recommend you to go in these trees, not to just blindly click into something, but look down the tree, select something which is for you the most interesting upgrade, like for example a certain type of ship, or you want to have a certain type of law, or if we go here, peasant levies, if we look at the professional armies, one of my favorites here is the armory, which is basically the major unlock point to bring in a standing army. There's always breakpoints in each one of these tech trees that are really interesting, and looking here for the ones that you really want to, and then just clicking there and leaving the rest of the game to beeline towards there has been really a good thing for me. So let's recap quickly. We want a high literacy on our people. We want a happy cleric estate, and we want to have as many institutions as possible to get the most research progress out of our country as possible. There's not much more we can do about that. The rest is just fine-tuning the text that you want to have that fit to your current playstyle the most, because it is nigh impossible to tech out everything just by brute forcing it down the line. Highly recommend to go for the stuff that's currently fitting your plans most. Okay, so we're almost done with the video. There's two more things that I want to talk about. The other thing on my list now is control and proximity. We've been touching these topics a little bit in the economy video already, but it's really important to control your country accordingly. You should note that the distance between your capital and a province is severely influencing the control that you have. Low control means lower tax base, but also lower amounts of soldiers being levied in this country. So this has direct overall just negative impact to have a low control. Control is mostly spread by roads. That is the main thing that you can do. But also, there's a couple of military buildings over the course of the time that you can build that create proximity. These are insofar interesting as if I would be putting a proximity generating building somewhere on the close-up borders of my empire, this would lower virtually the distance to my capital. In less abstract words, proximity is very high if we have no road to walk towards there. It gets lower if we have a road. It gets even lower if we have the ability to send mail. The proximity gets even better if we have a telephone. So proximity has a lot to do with the speed that we can communicate with one another, and this exerts a lot of control too. In short terms, try to keep the control as high as possible. Investing into control improvements is very powerful, and most importantly, invest your money always on the highest control areas first, and then trickle it down to the areas that have the next best control, and avoid overspending in super low control areas before increasing the control there. You can also bring in cabinet members to change that problem too, but they are only a temporary band-aid. You will require to set up infrastructure in form of roads and buildings that generate control and proximity. So the last point on my list is the parliament. The parliament happens every few years, and it allows you to generate a discussion about a certain topic. The topics of these discussions are brought up by your estates, and most importantly to note is some of these have very positive effects when they are successful. When you have a parliament discussion, you can, below here where my cursor is hovering right now, influence it positively at a high cost. Events will happen to influence it positively. But even if you don't manage to get the parliament thing through, there's a passive effect which will be up while the discussion is running. So always have the parliament running and try to pick out the things that have a positive appeal on the estates already, and the rest is just hoping that you get the ones that you want to have, and try for yourself if you want, if they are good enough for you. So that's all I wanted to put into this video. The next one, I want to talk about foreign diplomacy. We're going to talk about the ways and means how we can engage with other countries, what we can do, how we can vassalize other people's countries, how we can annex them afterwards, how we can avoid being victim of the same scheme, and how to declare war safely, and all the things in between. I hope that this one was helpful for you. Leave me in the comment section down below if you feel like I have had a few things missed out, or if I misunderstood anything. I mean, I'm doing my best here to understand the game, and I'm studying as good as I can, but mistakes happen. Anyways, questions away, leave a like, leave a subscribe, consider donating via Ko-fi or leave a YouTube membership, whatever tickles your fancy. Every form of help is deeply appreciated. Thanks everybody out there supporting Icon Gaming, and thanks for being out here until the very end. See you on the next one.